All right, what's up? We're ready to rock with European economic development. Sounds extremely exciting. I know. It's like, hold up. All right. Commercial capitalism. Oh, yeah. Link for the PDF is in the description. And we're on chapter 2 still. All right. Page 42. Western civilization is the richest and most powerful social organization ever made by man. One reason for this success has been its economic organization. This, as we have said, has passed through 6 successive stages, of which at least 4 are called capitalism. 3 features are notable about this development as a whole. Like that. In the first place, each stage created the conditions which tended to bring about the next stage. Therefore, we could say, in a sense, that each stage committed suicide. The original economic organization of self-sufficient agrarian units, manors, was in a society organized so that its upper ranks, the lords, lay, and ecclesiastical were the lords, lay, meaning like common folk, and ecclesiastical, meaning like the church, found their desires for necessities so well met that they sought to exchange their surpluses of necessities for luxuries of remote origin. This gave rise to a trade in foreign luxuries, spices, fine textiles, fine metals, which was the first evidence of the stage of commercial capitalism. In the second stage, mercantile profits and widening markets created a demand for textiles and other goods which could be met only by application of power to production. This third stage, industrial capitalism. This gave the third stage, industrial capitalism. The stage of industrial capitalism soon gave rise to such insatiable demand for heavy fixed capital like railroad lines, steel mills, shipyards, and so on, that these investments could not be financed from the profits and private fortunes of individual proprietors. New instruments for financing industry came into existence in the form of limited liability corporations and investment banks. These were soon in a position to control the chief parts of the industrial system, since they provided capital to it. This gave rise to financial capitalism. The control of financial capitalism was used to integrate the industrial system into ever larger units with interlinking financial controls. This made possible a reduction of competition with a resulting increase in profits. Now, that's something that Rockefeller was known to say, that competition is a sin. Here, let me pull that up so you can see that I'm not just making that up. I'd just like to get the quote, not like a full article on it, but obviously the fact that there's a full article written on it, you can see that it's a real thing. Reddit? No. Okay, quotes. Competition is a sin. See what he's saying? Competition is a sin. So that is a quote by Rockefeller, right? And he is part of this class of people out there talking about this mega financial class that's going to be funding and controlling all of the industries in the Western world. And so you can see here that this is what they're talking about. So not regular wake up time, 6 a.m. So we can see here that they're talking about this. The control of financial capitalism was used to integrate the industrial system into ever larger units with interlinking financial controls. This made possible a reduction of competition with the resulting increase of profits. And see, that's what I was talking about before. Also, when I was talking about the libertarian stuff about the deregulation and how, it results in their increasing profits at your expense because they're the only people that have enough money to fund it. And the funding, it's not coming from the government. I know people think it's coming from the government, but it's coming from above the government. Like, as you can see, you can kind of see now that the money is above the government. That's why it's capitalism. The money is above. The government doesn't control money. Money controls the government. As a result, the industrial system soon found that it was again able to finance its own expansion from its own profits. And with this achievement, financial controls were weakened and the stage of monopoly capitalism arrived. In this fifth stage, great industrial units working together either directly or through cartels and trade associations were in a position to exploit the majority of the people. The result was a great economic crisis which soon developed into a struggle for control of the state. The minority hoping to use political power to defend their privileged position, communism, the majority hoping to use state power to curtail the power and privileges of the minority. Basically like capitalist fascism or monopoly capitalism. And a monopoly can only really be upheld when there is a government blocking other people from creating the same products and services that the central or monopoly power creates. Both hope to use the power of the state to find some solution to economic aspects of the crisis. This dualist struggle dwindled with the rise of economic and social pluralism after 1945. The second notable feature of this whole development is that the transition of each stage to the next was associated with a period of depression or low economic activity. Notice? So we're moving from one stage to another now. Right? The transition of each stage to the next was associated with a period of depression or low economic activity. This was because each stage after an earlier progressive phase became later in its final phase an organization of vested interest more concerned with protecting its established modes of action than in continuing progressive changes by the application of resources to new, improved methods. This is inevitable in any social organization, but is peculiarly peculiarly, so, in regard to capitalism. The third notable feature of the whole development is closely related to this special nature of capitalism. Capitalism provides very powerful motivations for economic activity because it associates economic motivations so closely with self-interest. But this same feature, which is the source of strength in providing economic motivation through the pursuit of profits, is also a source of weakness, owing to the fact that self-centered a motivation contributes very readily to a loss of economic coordination. Hunger Games, anybody? Hunger Games? It's Hobbesian. When everybody's against everybody else, we've created a side where now people are competing so hard against themselves, against each other. That's part of the reason why we're in a low trust society. It's not just because, there's a bunch of races living together. You can look in the Bible. There's been plenty of times where races live together. In Rome, they had different races all in one empire. The low trust is because we're all going broke from these people. They're scamming us. Each individual, just because he is so powerfully motivated by self-interest, easily loses sight of the role which his own activities play in the economic system as a whole, and tends to act as if his activities were the whole, with inevitable injury to that whole. We could indicate this by pointing out that capitalism, because it seeks profit as its primary goal, is never primarily seeking to achieve prosperity, high production, high consumption, political power, patriotic improvement, or moral uplift. Any of these may be achieved under capitalism, and any or all of them may be sacrificed and lost under capitalism, depending on this relationship to the primary goal of capitalist activity, the pursuit of profits. I've always had a problem with pursuing profits. I'm not good at it. I'm not saying it's wrong, but I'm just not good at it. I'm not good at arbitrage. I'm not good at taking something from one place and then bringing it to another place and selling it to somebody else for a higher price. I just never understood the concept of that, but it seems to work, so I'm not against it. I'm just saying I don't understand it fully. During the 900-year history of capitalism, it has, at various times, contributed both to the achievement and the destruction of these other social goals. The different stages of capitalism have sought to win profits by different kinds of economic activities. The original state, which we call commercial capitalism, sought profits by moving goods from one place to another. In this effort, goods went from places where they were less valuable to places where they were more valuable, while money, doing the same thing, called arbitration, moved in the opposite direction. This valuation, which determined the movement of both goods and money, which made them move in opposite directions, was measured by the relationship between these two things. Thus, the value of goods was expressed in money, and the value of money was expressed in goods. Goods moved from low price areas to high price areas, and money moved from high price areas to low price areas. See, the original commercial capitalism was pretty good until we got to the monopoly industrial stuff. And now we've got to somehow get past the monopoly industrial stuff, right? Because capitalism itself is not bad. See, originally goods moved from low price areas to high price areas, and money moved from high price areas to low price areas, because goods were more valuable where prices were high and money was more valuable where prices were low. Thus, clearly, money and goods are not the same thing, but are, on the contrary, exactly opposite things. Most confusion in economic thinking arises from failure to recognize this fact. See, everyone's chasing money, not stuff. But you need the stuff, not the money. Then when you have the stuff, then inflation can't affect you as bad. Goods are wealth which you have, while money is a claim on wealth which you do not have. Thus, goods are an asset, money is a debt. If goods are wealth, money is not wealth, or negative wealth, or even anti-wealth. They behave in opposite ways, just as they usually move in opposite directions. If the value of one goes up, the value of the other goes down, and in the same proportion. The value of goods expressed in money is called prices, while the value of money expressed in goods is called value. Commercial capitalism arose when merchants carrying goods from one area to another were able to sell these goods at their destination for a price which covered the original cost, all cost of moving the goods, including the merchant's expenses and a profit. This development, which began as the movement of luxury goods, increased wealth because it led to specialization of activities both in craft and in agriculture, which increased skills and output and also brought into the market new commodities. Eventually, this stage of commercial capitalism became institutionalized into a restrictive system sometimes called mercantilism, in which merchants sought to gain profits not from the movement of goods, but from restricting the movement of goods. Thus, the pursuit of profits, which had earlier led to increased prosperity by increasing trade and production, became a restriction on both trade and production, because profit became an end in itself rather than an accessory mechanism in the economic system as a whole. Okay. So basically they want to restrict other people from making profits. The way in which commercial capitalism and expanding economic organization was transformed into mercantilism, a restrictive economic organization, twice in our past history is very revealing not only of the nature of economic systems and of men themselves, but also of the nature of economic crisis and what can be done about it. Under commercial capitalism, merchants soon discovered that an increasing flow of goods from low price areas to high price areas tended to begin to fall, while the arrival of buyers and ships in Malacca gave prices there an upward spurt. This trend toward equalization of price levels between two areas because of the double and reciprocal movement of goods and money jeopardized profits for merchants, however much it may have satisfied producers and consumers at either end. It did this by reducing the price differential between the two areas and thus reducing the margin within which the merchant could make his profit. It did not take shrewd merchants long to realize that they could maintain this price differential and thus their profits if they could restrict the flow of goods, tariffs, so that an equal volume of money flowed for the reduced volume of goods. In this way, shipments were decreased, costs were reduced, but profits were maintained. Two things are notable in this mercantilist situation. In the first place, the merchant, by his restrictive practices, was in essence increasing his own satisfaction by reducing that of the producer at one end and of the consumer at the other end. He was able to do this because he was in the middle between them. In the second place, so long as the merchant in his home port was concerned with goods, he was eager that the prices of goods should be and remain high. In the course of time, however, some merchants began to shift their attention from the goods aspect of commercial interchange to the other monetary side of the exchange. They began to accumulate the profits of these transactions and became increasingly concerned not with the shipment and exchange of goods, but with the shipment and exchange of monies. In the time, they became concerned with the lending of money to merchants to finance their shops and their activities, advancing money for both at high interest rates, secured by claims on ship or goods as collateral for payment. In this process, the attitudes and interests of the new bankers became totally opposed to those of the merchants. Although few either recognized the situation. Few of either recognized the situation. Where the merchant had been eager for high prices and was increasingly eager for low interest rates, the banker was eager for a high value of money, that is, low prices, and high interest rates. Each was concerned to maintain or to increase the value of half the transaction, goods for money, with which he was directly concerned, with relative neglect of the transaction itself, which was of course the concern of producers and consumers. In sum, specialization of economic activities by breaking up the economic process had made it possible for people to concentrate on one portion of the process and by maximizing that portion to jeopardize the rest. The process was not only broken up into producers, exchangers, and consumers, but there were also two kinds of exchangers, one concerned with goods, the other with money, with almost antithetical short-term aims. The problems which inevitably arose could be solved, and the systems were formed only by reference to the system as a whole. Unfortunately, however, three parts of the system concerned with the production, transfer, and consumption of goods were concrete and clearly visible, so that almost anyone could grasp them by simply examining them, while the operations of banking and finance were concealed, scattered, and abstract. So you notice, like, that's the same thing where it comes down to like men and women and all these other concepts where it's like, oh, it's clearly obvious what men are doing, but what women are doing, it's not so clear, but it is happening. So that they appeared to many to be difficult. To add to this, bankers themselves did everything they could to make their activities more secret and more esoteric. Their activities were reflected in mysterious marks in ledgers which were never opened to the curious outsider. In the course of time, the central fact of the developing economic system, the relation between goods and money, became clear, at least to bankers. This relationship, the price system, depended upon five things: the supply and demand for goods, the supply and demand for money, the speed of exchange between money and goods, and increase in these three, demand for goods, supply of money, speed of circulation, would move the prices of goods up and the value of money down. This inflation was objectionable to bankers, although desirable to producers and merchants, and also probably consumers. On the other hand, a decrease in the same three items would be deflatory and would please bankers, worry producers and merchants, and delight consumers. Oh, I see. So consumers like it. Who obtained more goods for less money? Okay, so they got. Okay. The other factors worked in the opposite direction so that an increase in them, supply for goods, demand for money, and slowness of circulation of exchange would be deflatory. Such changes of price, either inflationary or deflationary, have been major forces in history for the last 6 centuries at least. Over that long period, their power to modify men's lives and human history has been increasing. This has been reflected in two ways. On the one hand, rises in prices have generally encouraged increased economic activity, especially the production of goods, while on the other hand, price exchanges have served to redistribute wealth within the economic system. Inflation, especially a slow, steady rise in prices, encourages producers because it means they can commit themselves to cost of production on one price level and then later offer the finished product for sale at somewhat higher priced levels. This situation encourages production because it gives confidence of an almost certain profit margin. On the other hand, production is discouraged in a period of falling prices unless the producer is in the very unusual situation where his costs are falling more rapidly than the price of his products. The redistribution of wealth by changing prices is equally important but attracts much less attention. Rising prices benefit debtors and injure creditors, while falling prices do the opposite. A debtor called upon to pay a debt at a time when prices are higher than when he contracted the debt must yield up less goods and services than he obtained at the earlier such date on a lower price level when he borrowed the money. So it's kind of similar to like shorting the market, where you're buying it at a certain price and then the whole entire market goes up. So then when you sell it, you get more profit. It's not exactly the same thing, but damn. Alright. I'm just gonna go to the next section. A creditor, such as a bank which has lent money equivalent to a certain quantity of goods and services on one price level, gets back the same amount of money, but a smaller quantity of goods and services when repayment comes at a higher price level, because the money repaid is then less valuable. This is why bankers, as creditors in money terms, have been obsessed with maintaining the value of money, although the reason they have traditionally given for this obsession, that sound money maintains business confidence, has been propagandist rather than accurate. Hundreds of years ago, bankers began to specialize with the richer and more influential ones, associated increasingly with foreign trade and foreign exchange transactions. Bank for International Settlements, anyone? Since these were richer and more cosmopolitan and increasingly concerned with questions of political significance, such as stability and debasement of currencies, war and peace, dynastic marriages, and worldwide trading monopolies, they became the financiers and financial advisors of governments. Moreover, since their relationship with governments were always in monetary terms and not real terms, and since they were always obsessed with the stability of monetary exchanges between one country's money and another, they used their power and influence to do two things: to get all money and debts expressed in terms of a strictly limited commodity, ultimately gold, and to get all monetary matters out of the control of governments and political authority, on the ground that they would be handled better by private banking interest in terms of such a stable value as gold. So that's what I said before, that they're above the governments. The banks are above the governments, not the other way around. These efforts failed with the shift of commercial capitalism into mercantilism and the destruction of the whole pattern of social organization based on dynastic monarchy, professional mercenary armies, and mercantilism in the series of wars which shook Europe from the middle of the 17th century to 1815. Commercial capitalism passed through two periods of expansion, each of which deteriorated into a later phase of war, class struggles, and retrogression. That means going back in time. I could have said regression too. The first stage, associated with the Mediterranean Sea, was dominated by the North Italians and Catalonians, but ended in a phase of crisis after 1300, which was not finally ended until 1558. The second stage of commercial capitalism, which was associated with the Atlantic Ocean, was dominated by Western Iberians, the Netherlands, that's like southern Spain and Portugal, West Iberia, I think. The Netherlands and the English. It had begun to expand by 1440, was in full swing by 1600, but by the end of the 17th century had become entangled in the restrictive struggles of state mercantilism and the series of wars which ravaged Europe from 1667 to 1850. The commercial capitalism of 1440 to 1815 period was marked by the supremacy of the chartered companies such as the Hudson Bay, the Dutch and British East India Companies, the Virginia Company, and the Association of Merchant Adventurers, Muscovy Company. England's greatest rivals in all these activities were defeated by England's greater power and above all its greater security derived from its insular position, that of it being on an island, and them having one of the best navies in the world. Side note, did you know that the British Navy did not teach their soldiers how to swim, sailors how to swim, so that they would not go overboard during a battle? Interesting side note about the British Navy. Britain's victories over Louis XIV in the period 1667 to 1715 and over the French revolutionary governments and Napoleon in 1792 to 1815 had many causes, such as its insular position, its ability to retain control of the sea, its ability to present itself to the world as the defender of the freedoms and rights of small nations and of diverse social and religious groups. See, so people kind of liked it when you were actually helping other people. Among these numerous causes, there were a financial one and economic one. Financially, England had discovered the secret of credit. Economically, England had embarked on the Industrial Revolution. Credit had been known to the Italians and Netherlanders long before it became one of the instruments of English world supremacy. Nevertheless, the founding of the Bank of England by William Paterson and his friends in 1694 is one of the great dates in world history. For generations, men had sought to avoid the one drawback of gold, its heaviness, by using pieces of paper to represent specific pieces of gold. Today, we call such pieces of paper gold certificates. Such a certificate entitles its bearer to exchange it for a piece of gold on demand, but in view of the convenience of paper, only a small fraction of certificate holders ever did make such demands. See, this is going into how cash was created. We're going to start looking at how cash was created from the gold system. It earlier became clear that gold need be held on hand only to the amount needed to cover the fraction of certificates likely to be presented for payment. Accordingly, the rest of the gold could be used for business purposes or what amounts to the same thing. A volume of certificates could be issued greater than the volume of gold reserved for payments of demand against them. So basically, once people started putting their money, their gold, their actual value, something of actual value, into the bank so that they didn't have to carry it around, the first thing the bankers did was figure out that, hey, no one's going to come back in here to actually check on their gold. So what we can actually do now is for each piece of gold that there's only supposed to be one certificate existing for let's say each ounce of gold, there's only supposed to be one certificate existing for. Now we can make 4 certificates for that one, maybe 6 or 7, as long as that original person doesn't come back for their original ounce. We can just let those certificates ride as long as they want. And then we loan them out, and then, again, people bring back real economic value. Such an excess volume of paper claims against reserves we now call bank notes. See? In effect, this creation of paper claims greater than the reserves available means that bankers were creating money out of nothing. And then they're complaining about you being on welfare. Shut the fuck up. In effect, this creation of paper claims greater than the reserves available means that bankers were creating money out of nothing. Bankers were creating money out of nothing. Tragedy and Hope, page 48. Bill Clinton read this book and passed this class. So he knew for a fact that bankers were creating money out of nothing. And then they're like, but you're on welfare. And I'm not saying welfare is good, but nigga, if you creating money out of nothing, you ain't got shit to say to somebody that's on fucking welfare. The same thing could be done in another way, not by note issuing banks, but by deposit banks. Deposit bankers discovered that orders and checks drawn against deposits by depositors and given to third persons were often not cashed by the latter, but were deposited to their own accounts. Thus, there were no actual movements of funds, and payments were made simply by bookkeeping transactions on the accounts. Accordingly, it was necessary for the banker to keep on hand in actual money, gold, certificates, and notes, no more than the fraction of deposits likely to be drawn upon and cashed. The rest could be used for loans, and if these loans were made by creating a deposit for the borrower, who, in turn, would draw checks upon it rather than withdraw the money. So you see what's going on here, right? They take a fake money, then they loan it to you. Then you take the money and put that money in the bank, the fake money in the bank, and then they take the second level fake money, and then they loan that money out to somebody else. And then they take the money and put it back in the bank, and then they take that fake money, the third level of fake money, and then loan it out to somebody else. And then they're like, but you're on welfare. You're on welfare. I'm not trying to do a Southern accent on purpose. Sorry. No offense. Who in turn would draw checks upon it later rather than withdraw the money. Such created deposits or loans could also be covered adequately by retaining reserves to only a fraction of their value. Such created deposits also were a creation of money out of nothing, although bankers usually refuse to express their actions, either note issuing or deposit lending, in these terms. William Paterson, however, on obtaining the charter of the Bank of England in 1694 to use the monies that he had won in privateering, said, "The bank hath benefit of interest on all monies which it creates out of nothing." So this is the founder of the first modern European style bank, William Paterson, on obtaining the charter of the Bank of England in 1694, which was the most powerful bank in the world at the time, and as he's saying, the most powerful bank, or basically the most powerful organization in human history up until that point. The creator of the bank says, "The bank hath benefit of interest on all monies which it creates out of nothing. But you're on welfare." This was replaced by Sir Edward Holden, founder of the Midland Bank, on December 18, 1907, and is, of course, generally admitted today. This organizational structure for creating means of payment out of nothing, which we call credit, was not invented by England, but was developed by her to become one of her chief weapons in the victory over Napoleon in 1815. The emperor, as the last great mercantilist, could not see money in any but concrete terms, and was convinced that his efforts to fight wars on the basis of sound money by avoiding the creation of credit would ultimately win him a victory by bankrupting England. He was wrong. Although, see, this is people that do regular economic analysis. This is the theory. This is what they always think, that this system is going to crash, but it doesn't. All the way back in 1815, Napoleon, one of the leaders of one of the biggest armies in Europe, I'm sure he had tons of advisors and economic advisors, and they thought, just like a lot of modern economists keep saying, they think that it's going to crash. Even Napoleon did. He thought, well, as long as I just keep my money real, and make sure my economy works in a real way, in a fair way, in a more fair way, and only not using credit, basically, only using what goods and value that he has, he thought that their fake money, fake pretend credit, money out of nothing system would collapse. And this was in 1815. And people keep predicting, oh, it's going to collapse. Look, we like you know how those people, they'll pull up like these charts and then they'll be like, look how much money we're spending on healthcare, and look how much money we're spending on the army and public what's it called, and this and that and whatever, right? And they're showing you these freaking pie charts and saying, oh, well, see, it's your fault because you're spending all this money and you're bankrupting the government. Fucking assholes. It's the welfare. 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 The guy's on welfare. If we just cut welfare, then we'll be rich. You fucking idiots. And look, I'm not saying don't cut welfare, but what I'm saying is you trying to act like you ain't getting free money. You trying to act like you ain't making up fake fucking money. He was wrong, although the lesson has had to be relearned by modern financiers in the 20th century. Britain's victory over Napoleon was also helped by two economic innovations: the agricultural revolution, which was well established there in 1720, and the industrial revolution, which was equally well established there by 1776. Interesting. When Watt patented his steam engine. The Industrial Revolution, like the Credit Revolution, has been much misunderstood both at the time and since. This is unfortunate, as each of these has a great significance both to advanced and to underdeveloped countries in the 20th century. The Industrial Revolution was accompanied by a number of incidental features such as the growth of cities through the factory system, the rapid growth of an unskilled labor supply, the proletariat, the reduction of labor to the status of a commodity in a competitive market, and the shifting ownership of tools and equipment from laborers to a new social class of entrepreneurs. None of these constituted the essential feature of industrialism, which was, in fact, the application of non-living power to the productive process. This application, symbolized in the steam engine and the water wheel, in the long run served to reduce or eliminate the relative significance of unskilled labor and the use of human or animal energy in the productive process, automation, and to disperse the productive processes from cities, but did so throughout by intensifying the vital feature of the system, the use of energy from sources other than living bodies. In this continuing process, Britain's early achievement in industrialism gave it such great profits that these, combined with the profits derived earlier from commercial capitalism and the simultaneous profits derived from the unearned rise in land values from new cities and mines, made its early industrial enterprises largely self-financed, or at least locally financed. They were organized in proprietorships and partnerships, had contact with local deposit banks for short-term current loans, but had little to do with international bankers, investment banks, central governments, or corporate forms of business organization. This early stage of industrial capitalism, which lasted in England from about 1770 to 1850, was shared to some extent with Belgium and even France, but took quite different forms in the United States, Germany, and Italy, and almost totally different forms in Russia or Asia. The chief reason for these differences was the need for raising funds, capital to pay for the rearrangement of the factors of production, land, labor, materials, skill, equipment, and so on, which industrialism required. Northwest Europe, and above all England, had large savings for such new enterprises. Central Europe and North America had much less, while Eastern and Southern Europe had very little in private hands. The more difficulty an area had in mobilizing capital for industrialization, the more significant the role was of investment bankers and of governments in the industrial process. In fact, the early forms of industrialism based on textiles, iron, coal, and steam spread slowly from England to Europe, that England was itself entering upon the next stage, financial capitalism. By the time Germany and the United States, about 1850, were just beginning to industrialize. So, we were just beginning to industrialize. Germany was just beginning to industrialize because they're the periphery areas and England was the core. So now England's moving to the next stage, which is financial capitalism, not productive or industrial capitalism. So now they're moving from, being mainly about producing like industrial goods to now using fake money credit to control the people that produce goods. This new stage of financial capitalism, which continued to dominate England, France, and the United States as late as 1930, was made necessary by great mobilizations of capital needed for railroad buildings after 1830. The capital needed for railroads, with their enormous expenditures on track and equipment, could not be raised from single proprietorship or partnership or locally, but instead required a new form of enterprise, the limited liability stock corporation, and a new source of funds, the international investment banker, who had, until then, concentrated his attention almost entirely on international fluctuations of government bonds. International flotation of government bonds. So basically, before that, international bankers would just buy government bonds and try to manipulate the prices and keep the prices high. The demand of railroads for equipment carried this same development almost at once into steel manufacturing and coal mining. All right, I'm going to cut it off right here. We're right at the financial capitalism, 1850 to 1931. Oh, that's going to be real fun. Get ready. Okay, so what did we go over here so far? Basically, that as England was going ahead of all the other countries, they figured out that they can do this fake money thing. So like, look, I'm telling you, man, these people will try to convince you because you don't understand how fractional reserve bank. Let's do that real quick before we close the video out. We're going to actually just look at fractional reserve banking and what is fractional reserve banking, because that's what we're talking about here, right? Okay. Damn, that's messed up. They did Caroline like that, man. That's messed up, yeah. That's what I'm saying. These AI ads out of control, man. I've seen ones with like Oprah. They have had ads with like Oprah and like all types of other crazy shit. It's like ridiculous, man. You can't even use like a 0.2 second clip of a sample, but they can do that though. Like if I try to upload like a 0.2 second clip of a sample, YouTube like, oh, copyright, we got you. But they can do that. They can literally sign up for ads and use Caroline Leavitt's face on like a fake nude and shit and put that shit up on the internet. Are you fucking kidding me? Are you fucking kidding me? You see why I'm so mad, man? I'll be like, what the fuck, bro? All right. We ain't gonna read all this shit, yo. I just want to see how it fucking works. I need like a chart. Let's get like a chart. Let's do fractional reserve banking chart. So we don't gotta sit here all day reading, man, because I got stuff to do too in a little bit. All right, this one looks good. Can I blow that up? What? No, I don't want to go up. I don't know. I don't want to go into this weird website. All right. Let me see. What about this one? All right. I think you can see it. It's big. It should be big enough. So which is the first person? So see, the first person deposits $1,000 into the bank, right? They keep $100. They loan out $900 to that person. Then this person puts $900 into the bank, right? See, and then they keep only $90 of it and loan out the other $810 to this person, and then this person comes and puts it back into the bank. See, at this point, there is $1,900 in the system. The bank has $100. At this point, there is $2,710 in the system. The bank has $191. See, that's basically how it works, right? They get $1,000. They can loan out 900 of that while still giving you back your money. As long as you don't come back to get your money, it's fine. But in actuality, they can actually loan out 9 times that amount. This is kind of like not a very good chart, because in actuality, it's like they can act. Let's see what this one looks like. Oh, that one's too small. I'll have to look around. If I find a good one, I'll let you guys know. But yeah, that's basically what they're talking about. They're talking about how, each time somebody deposits money into the bank, they can loan out 9 times the amount of money that they have in the bank. You saw the quotes. They're in the book. Bill Clinton read the book. This is a book that PhD political scientists that are actually going to be politicians read. And they all know that the money is made out of nothing. And then they'll get up there and tell you that you're an evil, bad person for getting welfare, health care, anything like that, while they're printing money out of nothing. And look, I think that welfare is bad too, but I also think that them printing money out of nothing is also bad. And then it's doubly worse when they print money out of nothing and then try to shit on poor people and act like it's your fault because you don't have access to print money out of nothing. Right? Think about it, right? Think about if you could just give somebody a piece of paper and then they have to give you money. You'd be rich, right? You'd be rich so quick. You'd be rich like tomorrow. Right? If you could give somebody a piece of paper that they can go and spend at the store, you could just go to the store, buy a notebook, right? Buy some index cards, then write your name on each index card, give that index card to somebody, and then they can go and spend that index card at the store. But then they've got to come back and give you back $100, $200 of real money, right? Or even more. You got to give me some gold nuggets, some gold coins, some silver coins, right? And you stack them up in the bank. Like it's a joke, right? And this is why you're not allowed to talk about this stuff. This is why I'm banished to Free Thought Island, right? You notice any big time libertarians talking about this type of stuff? No, they're like, we got to secure the border, right? I will kill for my family. Well, actually, I won't kill, but I will hire other people to do it. Right? That's one of the main reasons why I don't advocate for all that stuff. Like, in theory, yeah, closed borders is great, but like, I'm the type of person where I'm not going to advocate for somebody else to do something that I would, if I was advocating for closed borders, that would mean that I was getting ready to go down and join Border Patrol. If I was advocating for going for a war, that would mean that I was getting ready to go down to boot camp. If you're not doing that, you shouldn't be doing the other. You shouldn't be, oh, we're ready for a war. Oh, really? Are you ready to go to boot camp? No? Then shut the fuck up. For real. All right. I'm already in trouble, but I'm going to get out of here anyway.